Good morning, students. In this video, we are going to discuss the continuation of enterprise security using Zachman Framework. Let's see the overview of this video. We are going to discuss a primitive model, composite model, and a primitive versus composite model, and how own specifications of enterprises, periodic table of enterprise models, and the row 2 and row 3 of the Zachman Framework. Let's discuss first one, primitive model versus composite model. What actually a primitive model is? A primitive model is one that only includes entities from a single column. A row 1 contains a list of primitives from each column. Row 2 has hierarchies built from this or those lists. Keeping the column separate in our models has many advantages. It makes the framework conceptual very simple. Because of the column are independent, we can populate them in parallel. Primitive models are relatively stable and slow changing. Example, if you're going to see about the primitive model, considering the information model in column 1 of the figure, the Zachman framework, what you have seen in the last video, our model can include a row 1 which consists of a list of data entities, a row 2 a data hierarchy, a row 3 a conceptual schema, a row 4 a logical schema, and row 5 a physical schema, and row 6 a record instance. Certainly row 6 changes constantly in the implementation, but the other cells would be relatively stable. Let's see about the next one, composite model. What actually composite model? Composite model combines primitives from multiple columns, and composite models are necessary for accessing impacts between column and for describing the implementations. Example of a composite model is a matrix that shows a relationship between the primitives such as process versus data. How does the Zachman framework helps with cybersecurity? Actually, NIST SP under 813.9, which recommends the establishment of an organization wide risk management activity. This activity is responsible for the enterprise's risk executive function. The risk executive function is a key stakeholder in the enterprise's investment decisions. In particular, information technology investments. The risk executive is not part of an IT shop but provides a business management perspective on the risk in the row 2 of the Zachman framework. Next, the Zachman framework empowers the risk executive to have visibility in the enterprises in the context of making a wise decision in order to manage the enterprise's security risk. The risk executive ensures that from inception, every decision leading to an IT project and an IT system will consider security risk from day one. Security requirements will be factored into the system design. In effect, a system will be developed with visible security requirements such as a dramatic sea change from today business as usual. There is a mad scramble to issue developers their own accounts, replacing a shared administrative account and other last minute ad hoc measures to pretty up the organization's security postures. Because the security situation is so profoundly broken, security testers are often drawing into helping the developer redesign their system to be secure. Unfortunately, this happens too frequently. The Zachman framework can use all this. Even every organization should have an enterprise's architecture, a blueprint for change. The risk executive uses the enterprise's architecture to assess a risk, levy security requirements, and ensure continuous monitoring of implementation. One of the first action that the risk executive should take is to establish an auditor user role in the architecture of every system. The auditor is a read-only user to reveal waste, fraud, and abuse. In the commercial world, these auditors are implementing the implementing the act through a framework such as control objectives for information and related technologies. Similarly, security control auditors use the auditor user role to assure continuous monitoring of the system and adequate levels of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Let's see the next one. Everyone has their own specification. What actually this is? And actually, Zachman Framework is a periodic table of enterprise model. It is a scientific abstraction that helps us to manage the real world. The figure shows the periodic table. The true value of Zachman is the realization that everyone has their own models. If the models are not meeting our needs or we don't know how to organize them, we can reorganize them using the Zachman framework. The model should be answer all the important questions from our perspective. Even we can use the Zachman framework from any perception as our baseline framework to take inventories of things and concepts, organize and define them, and then interrelate them to access effects, finding commonalities and understand the structure. Actually, the Zachman framework is a fruitful starting point for documenting the architecture in a feasible position to change it. Imagine you are a government IT sector or an IT security professional, and you have a framework that every effective for you. You probably have a system security plan, a plan of action and milestones, a certification test report, and an accreditation letter is needed for you. These are the items you need to answer all the important questions from your perspective. It also means you have a documented architecture, a blueprint for a change. Let's see the gold mine. What actually the gold mine? The row 1 of the Zachman framework contains exhaustive list of enterprise things which are not inherently useful by themselves, but when they are turned into hierarchies in row 2, you can visualize your enterprises and can navigate to clusters of commonality. Because row 2 models helps people visualize the enterprises and now have a new base for fact based decision framing or making. What actually the framework of row 3? In row 3 of the Zachman framework, which is an architect perspective, many organizations, however, do have a clue about their choice of framework for row 3 models. People in US Department of Defense choose the DoD architect framework, an ever expanding amalgam of viewpoint and model types. People in commercial industry might choose the open group architecture framework TOGAF, which contains expansive description of design methods. In generally, people in North Atlantic Treaty Organization NATO would choose the British Ministry of Defence Architecture framework MODAF. These are some of the most widely used framework, but there are many more. The row 3 framework generate mostly composite models which contain independent viewpoints. Example, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering IEEE has captured this concept formally in the standard IEEE 1471 recommended practice for architecture description of software intensive system. For an international perspective, there is a standard and universal applicable Row 3 framework. This framework is jointly standardized by the International Telecommunication Union (ITU), that is a telephone industry, and the International Standard Organization. It is the reference model for open distributed processing, actually an RMODP. The reference model for open distributed processing and the industry consortium driving its usage. The Telecommunication Information Networking Architecture Consortium TINAC are the reason that we can make a phone call from New York to New Zealand through dozens of telephone systems made by different vendors. The telephone systems are interoperable because the reference model of open distributed processing RMODP constraints are legally enforceable. This is the framework should seriously consider using for our Row 3 architect perspective models. So in this video, we have come across with an primitive model, composite model, and we have seen the difference between primitive and composite model, and then specifications, periodic table enterprises, and what actually the Row 2 gold mine and the framework of Row 3. If you have any queries, kindly please post the queries to me. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you.